everyone, welcome to the Stitch Sessions. I'm so excited to have you guys join me today. If you are new here, my name is Karen and I adore all things to do with crochet and crafting with crochet. And if you're a regular Stitch Sessions friend, welcome back. So this week we are working on a summer top. Finally, we're long overdue for doing one of these tops. So a few weeks back, you guys saw that I did a tutorial on the Lacey granny square, and I hinted that I was working on a project. I was using it for a project. So this is it. We are going to use that square to create this really pretty and really popular granny square top. And I love the Lacey effect. It's just nice and breezy and perfect for a summer project. Now I made mine kind of long. I like them to kind of drape so that I can wear them with leggings. It's nice and comfy for me. Now this is a bit more bodycon than I would have liked, just because I've put on a few pounds over the last few years, and I prefer my tops to just kind of drape a little bit more loosely. But it's just the nature of crochet, but I'm still really happy with how it came out. And actually, I know a lot of you would actually prefer to make this into a crop top, make it a little bit shorter. I've seen a lot of crocheters do that too, which is super, super fun. So it will definitely drape a little bit differently. But all in all, this was very fun to make. It will take you a little bit of time. So the actual granny motif doesn't take long at all, but you got to make quite a few of them, so that then you can sew them all together and create your top. And so what I did is I then created a teeny tiny little strap at the top end there, just to give me a little bit more of a relaxed fit under the arms. And that's pretty much it. So I think you're really gonna like this, and you still have some time to make one for yourselves and wear it for the rest of this summer. So let's get right to it. I'm gonna start off by taking you through the materials you're going to need, and then we are going to dive right in, and I'm gonna get you going, stitching up your very own summer top with the Lacey Granny Square. Okay, so here are all the things you're gonna get together to create your top. So first and foremost, we want your yarn. So I used the True Boo yarn by Lion Brand, and it is 100% rayon from bamboo. They come in 100 gram skeins, which contain 241 yards or 220 meters. It is considered a lightweight number 3. If you can find, or if you're comfortable with like a fine weight number 1 or 2, that would work really nicely too for the summer project. I just really love this True Boo yarn, and I love this color, so that is why I went with this one. And in case you're curious, the color is simply called Lilac. And for my size, I used up approximately 3 of these skeins. I would recommend getting always an extra one, so I did get 4. My sizes, lately with menopause, it runs anywhere. I could be a medium in something, I could be an extra large. So right now I would say on average, I'm a large. So 3 skeins gave me most of the squares that I needed, but I always have an extra one on hand for the trim work. So for my size, that is the amount of yarn that I use. So again, that's why it's important to take your measurements. So that's the yarn. The hook size I'm going to be using here, I'm not sure if you can see this, if the camera is going to focus in, but it is a size 4mm hook, which is known as a G or a size 6, I believe. And the recommended hook size is actually a 4mm hook for this project, okay? As always, make sure you have a pair of scissors and a yarn needle. You're going to be sewing in a lot of ends and a lot of pieces together, so make sure you have a yarn needle. You're going to want a piece of paper, and I've got one with the little form here. Now I have something like this available on the Crochet Crafty website that you can just download. It's absolutely free, and it's just kind of a nice way that you can mark up. I like to use pencil actually, and to kind of start creating the shape of your top so you can kind of see where you want things to sit. And it also gives you a little guideline on what measurements you should take. So a nice piece of paper, it's got a lot of spaces on either side. You can make notes on, of course, have a pen or a pencil. I actually prefer a pencil. And of course, a measuring tape, okay? Once you have those materials together, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go back and watch the tutorials on how to create the lace square and the half square. Okay, now how many of these you need, I'm going to get into in a moment, but just so we understand all of the materials first, because that has to do with how to take your measurements and all of that stuff. So I've got a whole pile of my whole stack here of my granny squares ready to go, and a whole bunch of these half motifs, which will help create a nice straight edge along the bottom. Now, if you want yours to sit, because some people do that with their design, that looks pretty cool too. If you like yours to have a little jagged edge, then you don't even have to worry about this part. But I plan on filling these in along the bottom so that I have a nice straight edge to my top, okay? So these are all the things that you are gonna wanna gather together, and then we are ready to start talking about how we're gonna construct the top once you have all of your motifs together. Now, let's talk about how this top is designed, and then how to roughly gauge how many squares you are going to need. So the great thing about working with modular projects is you could make more as you go if you need more. So let's talk about the design. Okay, so we are going to create our top by sewing together all of those lacy granny squares. Now, what you want to do is generally come up with the basic idea of the shaping of the top. So I know I want it to be kind of like a tank top. So I want it to create a little bit of a V neck. So I'm just going to do that. So this would be the corner of my squares here. So let's just say I've got this like this and this like this. So that is one square, give or take. So then I would continue. Now this is actually quite big. I need more squares than just two, but I'm just doing this to kind of give you guys a basic idea of how the top is going to be put together. So my next square is here, and then my next square will be right about here. And this is where you're going to gauge how long you want your top to be. So again, I'm not an artist. Okay, but you can see, so, and then I'm going to put a half motif here. If I wanted the edge of my top to sit just at the top portion of my hips, okay? And then of course there would be another motif here that's going to wrap around my side here. Boy, my artistry never ceases to amaze me how bad it is. So I'm just going to kind of shade that in so you can kind of see this top is just made up of all of your granny squares, and it's just a matter of how you're going to place it, right? So this is roughly how I want to construct my top, and then I am going to crochet some straps here, which we'll talk about at the end. So you're going to want to just start crocheting a whole bunch of squares, and then you want to start laying them out kind of like I did here. So I'm doing mine in a diamond shape. So you just want to lay them out and then see how many diamonds it takes to go across your bust. So I would start up here because the neckline is really what we want to get accurate, and see how many squares it's going to take for you to create that nice little V neck effect. So for me, I would have something that looks like this. And so this is what's going to create my V-neck here. Oh boy, I am a terrible artist. So that is what I would start doing. So I would start off definitely by crocheting about 5 of these granny squares so that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you want to create a V, okay? And then start building from there. Now, once you've done a whole bunch of these, I'm also going to take you through how you're going to attach and sew these together. For the beginning part, you could pin them, but because they're pretty lacy in nature, pinning can work, but it can be a bit cumbersome. So I would recommend doing first 5 squares to start. And then the first thing we're going to talk about is how to sew your squares together so that you can start attaching them. And then you can continue to build and add more squares, add another layer and add another layer. Now I've gone ahead and done the front part already. So I'm going to show you what I've got so far, because the idea is, initially I thought it was going to be like do a front panel and a back panel, but because see these sides here, these are actually going to wrap around you to the back. So really what we're going to do is we're going to start with our initial V shape, and then we're going to create it working downward and then wrapping to the back. So this is very stretchy, so you'll be able to pull it over you. So let me just grab the panel that I've started just to show you. Okay, so this is what I have begun crocheting already. So I've got, in this particular panel, I have 23 squares. So you can see that's my neckline here. So it took me 5 squares to create the neckline. So I did those first to see where it would sit kind of on my chest and kind of how far up my shoulders it was going to go. And then I continued to build another 2 rows underneath that. Once I got to the 3rd row, I just hold it up against my chest here, and I can see where this side is going to begin to wrap behind or under my arm. So right about here is where it's going to start folding under my arm. So this is almost kind of like just underneath my shoulder, and so my underarm is right about here. So you can see this half motif starting to wrap, and then I use this one. So that's what I mean about, it's kind of hard to gauge how many panels to do because of the fact that we are doing it in a diamond shape. I think it would definitely be different if we were doing it square on in the square shape. But because we're doing it in a diamond shape, you kind of have to work your way through that. So that is what I would recommend you do. And like I said, I've used 23 squares so far. And of course, this has come to a point. So I actually did these 3 deep to see how long it would go. This length sits just below my hips, which is what I wanted. So it's a little bit maybe longer than most people would like this top to be. If you're looking more to do something like a crop top, then definitely I would not do more than 2 rows, okay? And then I would have done the half motifs here, and then you can keep going from there. So I definitely know the length is okay. So what I will do now is I will just start filling in the sides here. So see, that's where I want my length to end. Here I'm going to put these half motifs. Okay, so I've done about 8 of these so far, 8 half motifs, and then you'll just have to gauge to see how many it takes you to go all the way around. Okay, so this is basically the gist of the construction of this. It's not as, I don't know if I would say it's not as straightforward, like, you know, you take your bust measurement, you take your back to waist measurement. It really is, you kind of build it as you go, so to speak. So this is the shaping. So I added this one here so I could see basically where it's going to fit. So my arm, this goes right under my arm. So you could see it's going to look like a bit of a zigzag, and this is going to wrap around the back. So I would recommend you start with those first 5, get your neckline where you like it, or just start experimenting with where you want the neckline. You are going to have to build another row here so that you can really start seeing like how far does this come out? Are you going to need a 3rd row before you start wrapping under? Like if you're a little bit bigger in the chest, then you might need a 4th row, right? So this is why I like using kind of the idea of, you know, drawing out the shape of what you want it to look like, but then as you crochet your squares, you really do have to kind of keep trying it on, so to speak, as you go along. So the next segment of this tutorial is going to be how to sew these squares together, or how to crochet. We do them join as you go using chain stitches. And so it just looks like, see, it looks very seamless. Okay. And so that is the next segment, because there are 2 other tutorials on how to create the square and the triangle. Again, I'll leave them up somewhere in the cards, either previously in the intro and definitely in the description box down below. So you're going to want to go watch that elegant lace granny square and the half square motif. Crochet up a bunch of them. Like I said, start off with 5 and then come back here. And the next segment we're going to do next is sewing them together, and then you're going to proceed to build it up from there. And then once I've done a few more after this section, I'm going to come back, meet up with you guys, and show you how far I've come along. So the back is also going to have a V exactly the same way, but what we will do, and I'll talk about this when we get there, is for the back portion, we're going to add one of these half motifs here and fill that gap in there so that the back portion has a little bit of a straight edge, and it will also kind of help you tell the difference between the front and the back of your top. So I know that I need to continue making the same number of squares that I have here now. So like I said, I currently have 23, but then I still have to fill in a few of these gaps here. So these here, see, I'm going to continue to create this, but see this one would end up folding over. Okay, so that's how you're going to start seeing the shape. So let me see if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm just going to, I still have a few more to sew here, right? And so I know that that is the edge of my top, so this motif would fold over. This one will stay straight. And then the next one here is going to fold over like this. So this is the side of my top here. See that? Now, again, at the bottom, you can, some people like to put a fringe. They like to keep it like that. I am going to straighten mine out by placing these little half motifs. And that's how you can see that. So once I've sewn 1, 2, so I've already sewn that one. See that? So I'm going to sew, whoops, I'm going to sew 1, 2, and then again, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to fold it over so I can see it fits nicely. Okay. And then I can see how many more squares I need to do. So I need to do all the same as these are here, but not these two, right? Because these two will fold over. So I don't need to count these. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. I know it's kind of tricky because it's hard to get an exact measurement, but you can get the full bust measurement and cut it in half. And that'll at least give you a guide, but because this stretches a lot, it's a lacy motif and it does stretch out, that could end up making your top really, really large because it's going to stretch. So you can use it as a guide, your bust measurement, and maybe even take an inch or two away because, like I said, it will stretch as it hangs. You can use that method, or you can do it the way I'm doing, which is build as you go. So hopefully that makes sense. So basically you're going to get to work on crocheting a lot of these squares, and I've got a whole pile more here. So I think in total so far, I've done about 40 squares, okay? And again, like I said, I'm kind of like a large to, you know, depending on the size, I can be a medium, but lately I've been more of a large to an extra large, and this is gonna sit really loosely on me. So I've got about 40 squares on the go, but I will let you know the exact amount once I've finished the full panel. Okay, so as I'm mapping out my, my squares, I can see, based on these folded ones here, that for my side, I needed 23 squares for each side. So 23 squares for the front, 23 squares for the back to create this shape. And then I needed an additional 6 full squares that we're going to wrap around the sides here. Whoops, so that one's already sewn in. So you see you've got 1, 2, 3, and then this one is 4, 5, and 6. This one's wrapped around the side as well. So I need 23, so it's 46 plus 6 more squares, which is 52. And then I will need 8 of these half motifs, which it so happens that's exactly how many I crocheted. So in total for my size, I am crocheting 52 full squares and 8 half squares. Okay, so let's get to the business of crocheting our squares together. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is I'm going to show you how I sewed my initial V, and that's the thing that you're going to need to construct to start seeing, you know, sizing wise how it's going to fit on you. Okay, so if I just bring this back again real quick, so you're going to do this first row here, and that for me, when I put this top together, was the first most important row to put together so you can check your sizing. And then once you get the gist of how to sew them all together, you'll be ready to just continue putting all of your squares together to create your full top. So we're going to start off with our first 2 squares. And at this point, I want to make sure, so I've got a whole bunch of my squares here. You want to probably make sure that you've sewn in all of your ends. So I've actually still got a pile here that I have left to sew in the ends. It just makes it easier and less distracting if you sew all the ends in first and then sew them together for this particular project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by placing a slip knot on my hook first. Okay. And then the other thing is make sure that your squares, both of them, are right sides facing up. So you don't want to accidentally, which I know one of them on that panel I have already done. You don't want to accidentally sew one right side to one wrong side. Now it's not the end of the world, but as you can see, they do look slightly different. I want the side of that ridge on the inner ring to show. So that's how I know those are both my right sides. So I'm going to start in the corner, and with the slip knot on my hook, I'm going to insert right into that corner space right there, and I'm going to slip stitch to join my yarn. Just like that. Okay. And then I'm going to chain 2, 1 and 2, and then I'm going to pick up my other motif here. I'm going to find that corner, or a corner that I want to match it to, and I'm going to slip stitch into that corner. So I'm just going to pull it through, and now my squares are attached. So I attached corner to corner, and then I chained 2. So I'm always going to chain 2, and then I'm basically going to crisscross back and forth between this square and that square. So now I'm going to come back to my front square, we'll call it, and into the next chain space, I'm going to slip stitch. Now see how this one's twisting? You really want to be careful when you pick it back up that the right side is facing up. So I've chained 2. Okay, that's the right side. And now I'm going to go into the chain space next to the corner, which is this one here. And I'm going to slip stitch to join. I know it looks a bit wonky because it's flopping all over the place, but once you do enough of these, you will get the hang of it. So you always slip stitch into the space, then you chain 2, then you come back to the corresponding square, and into the following space, you slip stitch into that space. Just like that. Chain 2, 1, 2, then I go back to the other square, again, making sure the right side is facing up. And then I find the next chain space and slip stitch into there. Chain 2, I come back to my first square, next chain space, slip stitch. It's pretty straightforward. 1, 2, whoops, make sure it's not twisted. Yeah, so you always want to do that. There's my front, and now I'm going to find the next chain space and slip stitch. So if I just pull this out, you can now see that the squares are just attached and the mesh stitch is just naturally blending in. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish this here, and then I'll show you guys the final effect. Okay, and then I just have my last corner here on the front side, or the front square, and then I'll chain 2, and then I have the last corner there. So technically they should all match up. Sometimes it happens that it doesn't, but we'll just do our best. So you can see that there, it looks seamless. So because I'm focusing on the initial single row, I am going to chain 1 and snip my yarn here. Now sometimes you can continue on when you're in the body of the top to just continue bringing the next square and just keep going around before you have to snip your yarn. And once you get into the groove of putting your top together, I think you'll know what I mean. Right now, I'm just going to work on sewing one side and to create that first row. So really, you can't even tell where one starts and one ends. It will look a little bit, see, it looks a little bit jagged from one side to the other, but once you sew all your pieces together, that will go away. So then the next thing we want to do is take another square, and now I'm going to attach it on this side. So this will be my center. Okay, so I'm going to put that there. This is going to be the center of my V. And then I'm going to take this square, and now I'm going to attach it here. So that chain 2 slip stitch method is the method you're going to use to put all of your squares together. Okay, and then I'm going to sew that and create that V there. Okay. Okay, so I've done these 3 here. So this is my neckline, which in my case is actually the back. So I am now going to just continue to attach it to my first panel here. So what I'm doing now, because I've already started the first section, and I've done enough here that I can now fold my work over as I've shown you before, this second neckline here is now going to fit nicely right here. And so this is now where I would attach this to my second neckline. So this is the back. And then I would continue to sew my squares now from here to create the rest of the body of my top. And then at the very end, I will add in all of my little half pieces here. So that will probably be on the bottom edge here once I'm done. And then actually probably one of the first things I'll do too is I'll place the little half here, just because this will tell me that this side is the back side. It doesn't really matter whichever one you choose because all the squares look the same, but then it'll just kind of help you know when you're putting the top on which side is the back. So the back will have that little half one there, and then the front will just keep that traditional V. So now this will take you a little while. So you're gonna press pause, you're gonna leave this video, and you're gonna go and sew all of your motifs together to create the drape and the size that you like. And once you've got the whole body, I'm going to meet back up with you here, and then we're going to talk about creating our straps and a little edging around your top. So have fun with this, guys, and I'll meet you back here very shortly in Video Magic. I'll meet you back here in a couple of seconds. but for you, it'll probably be a little while. So go ahead, do all your squares, sew them together, and then we'll meet back here in a little bit. Okay guys, so my top is now fully put together. You can see there's lots of tails that I have to be sewing in. You can see how I use the triangles to just even out the bottom edge there, and that is what the top looks like. Isn't it pretty? Now it's sitting on the mannequin, which is a lot smaller than I am. So you can see the neckline goes pretty much down almost below the bust line. It does not sit there on me. It probably sits right about there on me. So I just wanted to kind of show you how it drapes. So that is the front. And let's have a look here at the back. And so at the back, you can see that I added that triangle shape there just so that I could distinguish the back from the front, but you don't have to. So that is how it's looking, just gorgeous. Now now that it's kind of all put together, if you can find a fine weight number 2 or even a fine weight number 1 yarn, that's really probably going to be the best thing for a top like this. If we're having hot summers like we've been having this year, then this is probably going to feel maybe just a bit too hot. But I think for me, it's going to be just fine. And actually, this would make for a lovely sweater if you made it with sleeves as well. Now you'll notice here too that there is a little gap here. Now I've tried it on a little bit, and I most likely will crochet a little strap here. Now if you're much smaller in frame, you might feel comfortable with actually bringing these 2 points right together and just slip stitching it to join. And then we're going to talk about our neckline in just a moment. And then this would be plenty for your armhole here, just like that. See, for me, I found that the armhole just was a little bit tight to do that. It just came up a little too high under my arm. So I am going to add just a little bit of length there. And we're going to do that once we start talking about doing the neckline trim as well as the armhole trim. So the top now is technically, the structure is complete. You guys can see my little wrapping paper back there. So let me just back up here. So the top now is complete, but we need to finish it off. So number 1, I need to weave in all of these ends. Oh boy, that's going to be fun, right? So I'm going to weave in all of the ends. And then what we're going to do is we are going to tackle the neckline first. So we're going to create a nice, very dainty little trim around the neckline. And while we're doing that, I am going to create my straps, my little straps here, and that will blend in nicely with the neckline. After that, we're then going to use the same technique to just create a nice, neat little trim around the armholes. And remember, when we're sewing these together, see how there's some little dips in and around? We just want to do a little trim to kind of clean all of that up there. And then we'll do a final one, same technique on the bottom. Again, just to give it a little bit more of a straighter edge. Some of you actually might have not even used the triangle. You might have liked that kind of zigzaggy edge. I've seen that done, and that looks just as pretty. So here it is. We're almost there, guys. Just wanted to show you now how it looks all put together. So I'm going to sew in my ends, and then I'll be back here, and we're going to talk about how we're going to do the trim around our neckline. Okay, so I have finally woven in all my ends. It took me a while, so lots of ends to weave in, but it is now done. And I've actually gone ahead and done the bottom trim here just so you guys can see what the effect is. It will be the same in the other parts that I am going to show you. So I just wanted you to kind of see what the end result is. I still have to weave in that one final end where I did the trim. So all I did was I continued to do the chain 4 and slip stitch to create that really pretty little diamond shape mesh stitch. So that's what the final trim looks like once you've got a bit of a border in, and see how it's pretty much is evened out a little bit more. So don't worry if yours is wavering a bit. That will all get taken care of. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is actually how to do it, but I'm going to show you how I did the armhole first. I know I said I was going to do the neckline, but I worked on the armhole to see how it was going to come out, and this is what mine looks like. The same technique here, using just the chain. I believe I used chain 3s here just to kind of tidy up the armhole here. And then I did a chain 8 just to connect the front to the back. And now this strap will get slightly thicker once I do the neckline in the front and the back. So this is what it looks like. And again, for those of you that might make more sense just to connect these two tips, then that's what you're gonna do. So I'm gonna show you how to do the sleeve, and it will be the same for the neck and the bottom trim. Okay, so what you wanna do is start off by placing a slip knot on your hook here. And I am going to start, so you can see I still have this end here to weave in. I'm gonna start right just under the arm. So that way I'm gonna crochet up, create my strap, and then crochet back down. And that will create my armhole opening, and it'll allow me the ability to work in the round for a few rounds. So I'm gonna go to the other side here, and I'm just gonna make sure that's sitting nicely and it's folded appropriately where I need it to go, right there. So this fold right here is where I'm gonna start. And so you can see that the back side is the one that's facing up at the moment. So I'm just gonna find a spot anywhere here where I can join my yarn. So I'm gonna insert my hook and place a slip stitch. Just like that. Okay, so now I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3, and I'm just going to try and find the next space, which is super easy right there. I'm going to insert and I'm going to slip stitch to join. So I'm just basically doing that mesh stitch we talked about, and I'm going to chain 3 again, 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm gonna go into the next space. Nice and easy. Now I'm using chain 3s here because I do want to just snug in that little opening a bit. This is stretching quite a bit. So I just wanna give it a little bit more of a snug effect, just slightly under the arm. So I always chain 3, and I just make my way around. So every time there's a chain space, I'm just gonna slip stitch, chain 3, and another space there. And I'm just kind of, lightly aware of the fact of where they join with another square. So right there, I can see that. So from here, I'm gonna jump into here and chain 3. And now I'm gonna go to this one here. See that? So they just start to kind of melt one into the other, I like to say. They merge, I guess. And the next space there. So we're now working our way up to that point where the strap is going to be. Okay, so I'm just working my way up. Chain 3 into the next space. Chain 3. And my point is here, so I'm just gonna go into that next space there. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now I'm at this little point here, and into this space, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna single crochet. So I'm just gonna insert, pull up a loop, and single crochet. Just because I'm gonna create the strap now, I just want something a little extra there. So for my strap, and this will be different for you, I just chained 8. I didn't need it to be very long because again, the V-neck in the front is fairly low. So I don't want it to go much further lower. So I just needed a teeny tiny little strap to kind of join the front to the back. So for me, I'm gonna chain 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, and again, not too tightly because we do have to work into these again. And now I want to find the back panel again right here. And so I am just going to find this point here, and I am going to single crochet into that. So I'm just going to, oops, there we go. Just going to pull up a loop and single crochet. Now, what I want to do is I want to take my work, just slightly rotate it so that now I'm going to just stay contained to the armholes. So now that we've joined this, you see that? The front has joined to the back. And now I just continue to do my little thing here. And I'm going to chain 3 as always, 1, 2, and 3. And now the next space is right here, and I slip stitch. So I just continue on my merry little way. So easy. This is the real fun part because you don't really have to worry too much about counting or figuring out where to go. It's really straightforward. You can just find the spaces and create your little trim. And it goes by pretty quickly, a lot quicker than weaving in all of those ends. So let's see here. Okay, so I'm coming to here. I'm going to go into this space. 1, 2, 3. And so this is where it joins. Yep, I'm going to go in there. And 1, 2, 3, into the next space. So all I'm doing is I'm just continuing my way back down the armhole there, back down to where we started. So 1, 2, 3. So that's where we started there. So I'm just making my way down. Okay, and I'm coming up to the end there. I am going to go into this little spot here, and that's where I started. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do one more round on the inside of the armhole. So we're going to chain 1, 2, and 3, and then I'm just going to go right into that space. So we're just going to continue on the pattern, okay? And then I'll weave in this end, and that will just merge nicely there. So I will continue on 1, 2, 3, and now I'm working into those chain 3 spaces. They will sit a little bit more snugly to the armhole opening, but that's okay. Creates a nice little trim. So I'm going to keep doing this until I get up to where we created that strap. I'll meet you there because now I feel like you guys know what to do going up, and then I'll talk you through how we're going to go across there. Okay, so I've reached up to where I started my strap. So I am going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to find that first chain right there, okay? Into that, I am going to place a single crochet stitch. I'm just going to go in through the top there like that and single crochet. And that is what I'm going to do across this little chain here. That's going to give it a little bit more girth, a little bit more strength for my strap. And this strap will continue to widen a bit once we do the neckline as well, okay? So into, sorry guys, I'm trying to get my lighting down here. Into the next chain, we're going to insert and single crochet. So you will have 8 single crochets all the way across. Just like that. So that's going to give you a nice little kind of seamless join to continue on your armholes. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to continue placing single crochet across, and then once you get to the end, you will chain 3 and then work into your spaces again and finish off the armhole until you get to the bottom. It's just 2 rounds for this armhole opening, and then you're going to snip your yarn, weave in your ends, and then you're going to do the same thing for the other armhole, okay? Once you're done that, I am going to briefly meet up with you for the neckline. Even though it's the same thing, I actually do want to just bring up the dip of that neckline a little bit. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. In the meantime, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So do your armholes. Actually, what I would recommend is finish this armhole, do the second one, and then go down and do the bottom trim, because this is super easy and it'll be quick. It won't take you very long because it's very straightforward. You're just going to go around the way. Now for the bottom trim, I did 4 rounds. Okay. And you might do less, you might do more. I just found that, you know, that little bumpiness between the joins, I just needed a few rounds to kind of smooth it out. So I did 4 rounds at the bottom. And for the armholes, I only did 2 rounds each. Okay, so go ahead and do all of that, and then I'm going to meet up with you to do the neckline. Okay, so I have completed both armholes. So now my top is actually completely formed. So you see that? So I've got my straps. So I just want to take you guys through how I'm going to do my neckline. So you can see it's a little jagged in the back, which is no problem. We've talked about that in the armhole. But I do want to actually raise this neckline, just the dip of the V, because there's a lot of stretch to this. There's a bit of weight. It's creating my V line to go a little bit lower than what I'm comfortable with. So I just want to show you guys how I would close that gap a little bit to raise up the V. But just to start with here, I'm going to show you, I am going to start at the back. So remember where I put this triangular spot here? This helps me kind of differentiate my front from my back. And I am going to slip stitch to join at the back. So that will be kind of my seam at the for my round, we'll say. So I'm going to start off as usual, slip knot on my hook. And then I'm going to pick up my work, of course, making sure you've got the right side facing out. So I know my right side has the ridges. And I'm going to start right in this space here. And I'm just going to slip stitch to join. And for this project, I've been leaving my tail slightly longer just because weaving your ends into chains a lot of the time can be tricky. So I like to have a nice longer tail. Okay, so I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then just continue on my merry way here. So remember that the armholes and the neckline, we are going to be using the chain 3. That's just going to make it a little bit more snug. But the bottom trim, I did chain 4, and that's what's going to keep that edge uniform. So just remember that. So I'm going to go ahead and continue doing this until I get to this little first part of the strap here. And again, I'm just going to take you through how I'm going to go across because we're working on the other side of the chain. If you're more experienced, you don't need this. But for those of you that are a little bit newer, I'm going to take you through it. And then I will continue on and meet you down there at that little point there. Okay, so I'm coming up to my strap here. So I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. And there is one more space before the strap. So I'm going to slip stitch into there. And then I'm going to find that first chain. And that looks good. Right about there, I'm going to insert and I'm going to single crochet. So now I'm going to go across the bottom of that chain. Remember that? So there we go. So now I'm going to go into this chain and single crochet. And that's what you're going to do all the way across. Nice and simple. So this gives the strap now a little bit more thickness and strength, which is what I like there. And we started with our chain, and now we've got single crochets on either side of that chain, and it's just giving us a little more sustenance to that strap. Okay, so I'm just at the end. This is my last one here. I've made it across, and now look at that. Much nicer in terms of like a nice thick strap. I like that. Okay, and then we just continue on as usual. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we find our next opening there, and we continue on down the way. So 1, 2, 3, and keep going. Okay, so I'm coming up to that little dip in my V neckline here. See right there? So what I'm going to do, I just want to kind of bring that little point up a bit. So I'm going to close that gap there. And so I'll show you how I'm going to do that. Okay, so just chain 3. And instead of going into the very next chain space, I'm going to skip that chain, and this is the center. So you can see that's the point of that previous square there. So I'm going to slip stitch to join there. I'm going to chain 3. Some people might even chain 2 to make it a little tighter, but I'm going to keep my chain 3s. I'm going to skip this space, and then I'm going to go into the next space. So by skipping a couple of those spaces, it just, see how it brings up. So instead of the V being down here, just brings it up a little bit. Now, many of you might want to do a few more rounds, which I probably will do a second round and cinch this in again. So I'm going to chain 3 and then continue on doing the same thing I've done for the rest of the round. So I'm going to keep going until I finish round 1 of the neckline, and then I will meet up with you guys at the back seam. Okay, so I've come to the back here, and I've just done my last chain and slip stitch. Now you can see, hopefully you can see that, still has quite a bit of a bump there. So what I'm going to continue to do is I'm actually going to work a few more rounds just in the back. And it's because I really like the thickness of this strap. I don't really want to create any more girth. So instead of working the whole round, I'm just going to work the back again for a couple more rows, and then I'll go and check the front neckline and see how I like that and do another row or 2 accordingly if I feel it needs it. But generally speaking, this is what we're going to do with our chains and our slip stitches. Okay, so I am actually going to snip my yarn off here. I've just slip stitched to join. I'm going to snip my yarn. I'm going to weave in these 2 little ends, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to start at the base of the strap here, and I will probably start here. So I don't want to add any more girth, like I said. I'm going to start here and then just work a couple more rows back and forth just to smooth out this little dip here. And with a few more rows, that generally does the trick, which is what did the trick for the bottom trim here. So that's basically it, just final touches, and then we'll be ready for the final reveal. And here it is, guys, the final reveal, the summer Lacey granny top. And I'm very excited to finally finish this project. Although it was technically quick because you can whip off these squares quite quickly, putting together the construction, kind of figuring out where you want to lay out your squares, and then sewing all the ends, that just takes a little bit of extra time. So although I did enjoy working on this project, I'm very happy to see it finally come to an end and to finally be able to have a finished product that I can put on and wear. Now, this is, like I said in the intro, a bit of a body contouring top when it is this long, and of course there's some weight to it. So not really my personal favorite at the moment because I've put on a little bit of weight. So I prefer something to drape a little bit more loosely, but all in all, I am still very happy with it. Some of you I know would probably make this into a crop top, but in any case, I'm still really happy with how it came out. I hope you found it also easy to do in terms of just figuring out how many of these square motifs that you needed to create your size. Now, you're probably going to have some more questions, so please do not hesitate. Leave those for me in the comment box down below, and I know many of you like to email me directly. So just drop me a line at info@crochetcrafty.com. And don't forget, come say hi to me. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at The Stitch Sessions. You're going to see a lot of postings of this top, especially on Instagram. I'm going to put up quite a few photos, still photos on there of this top, so you can get a nice closer look. And also, you should go on and visit me at the website at crochetcrafty.com and then sign up for the monthly newsletter, because generally I will post a lot more up close still photos of a lot of our projects and some close-up shots, so that way you get a chance to see the finer details. And what's really great is there's still so much summer ahead of us, so you have plenty of time to get this done and wear it for this fabulous summer season. So we've been long overdue for a summer crochet top. So I hope you like this one. If you do, make sure to give me a thumbs up. If you're new here and you love this project and you like hanging out with me, make sure to click that subscribe button and come join me every Wednesday morning when I upload a brand new tutorial. Thanks as always, guys, for joining me. Thanks for continuously supporting the channel, and I look forward to sharing more fun projects with you guys this season. So for now, happy crocheting, take good care, and I will see you guys in next week's session. Bye-bye.